Hi, if you've been following my channel recently, you've seen a number of my videos on Fujifilm Autofocus. In this video, we're going to talk about how this system, though quite good, can also be quite fussy, and that puts an onus on us, the photographer, to set it up right. And if we don't, we may not get the results we're hoping for. So let's talk about it. Okay, you've seen my videos before about various aspects of Fujifilm autofocus, and there's plenty of other good videos out there that discuss Fujifilm autofocus, which I'm not going to repeat. Rather, I'm going to look at the issues in our choices when we choose a particular mode, and we go out to take some pictures and we choose a mode, and it's not the right mode for what we're doing. Or we've set that mode up wrong, and it doesn't give us the results we want. And there's also some hidden ramifications that can really trip us up. So let's talk about these things. Okay, there's three modes. You've got single point, which is, as it says, uses a single point on the screen, on the sensor. You've got zone, which is a box, which you can have three sizes, and it picks points in that box. Or you can have wide tracking, which is pretty well the whole thing. Now, one of the mistakes I made early on with wide tracking is I assumed, wow, that's pretty good. It's going to give me coverage all across that screen. But it comes with some hidden issues. And so it turns out to be not the best, but actually the worst. I would suggest now to everybody, if you're picking up a Fujifilm camera, use it on single point, unless you need zone. And don't go to wide tracking unless you absolutely need to. So single point should be your first choice, then moving to zone. And as an example is if we can easily put the single point on where we want the focus, for example, a portrait, there's no need to use wide tracking or zone for doing portraits. So you would pick your, forward eye, for example, pick that focus point and away you go. And you'll find that when you're doing that, these cameras work extremely well. There's very little in the way of problems. However, single point is not so great when your subject is moving around fairly quickly and you're having trouble keeping the focus point on your subject. A perfect example, you have a little boy and you've given a brand new puppy and now you want to take pictures of your little boy and the puppy playing in the backyard. So if you use single point, you may have trouble keeping the single point on your son as he runs around. So you go switch to zone. So you're taking pictures on zone, that's cool. He's in focus, but then sometimes it grabs the puppy. And then a car goes behind him and it fixes on the car. And you're going, oh, wait a minute, this is no good. I don't want pictures of somebody's car. And I don't always want the dog in focus, I want my son in focus. So what can you do about that? What's gone wrong? Well, the thing is you've used zone in general purpose mode, which is medium stickiness and picking up anything from background to the foreground. If you'd gone into the zone tracking settings, you could have set it up for only subjects that are close to the camera and maximum stickiness, probably medium speed because your son is running around. Now what happens is it stays locked on your son. And so if the dog runs in front of your son, it doesn't matter. If a car goes behind your son, it doesn't matter. It stays locked on. So you see the point I'm making here. You went out there with your camera, your son and his dog, and because you didn't take it one step further and tune the zone for exactly the situation you were in, you got, iffy results. When your son was in focus, he was really in focus. But then sometimes it's a dog and one time it's that car. So that's part of the problem, is to make sure that you take it that extra step and pick the stickiness and the speed and the zone, front, center, rear, for what you're having to do, what you're trying to do. Another issue comes in when we start adding in face detect or object detect, like bird detect. I'll talk birds. When you are using these features, what happens is they override whatever mode you're in. And so if you're in single point mode and you use bird detect, well, it's going to focus on the bird and go all over the place and ignore the single point. Same with face detect or eye detect, does the same thing. So if you put face detect on your son in single point as he's running around with his dog, that's cool. It'll follow his face around and it'll stay in focus and everything will work just fine. However, there's a caveat to this. When you're in mode, one of these modes for face or eye or bird, it's overriding your current setting, be that single point, zone, or wide tracking. But what happens when it loses the object? It loses the person's face. So for example, your son falls flat in his face and the dog jumps on top of him. That's a funny scene, right? But if you're in single point and your single point is focused on the fence 15 feet behind him, now your fence is in focus and your son isn't, and the dog isn't. So what you really need to be doing is having it in zone focus with face detect, so it would stay locked onto your son when the camera could not see his face and couldn't stay locked on his face. So you have to be aware, you have to ask yourself the question, what happens if it loses the bird or loses the person's face or their eye? Where's it going to go with its focus? And this is a problem I had with this lens. And by the way, it gets worse the longer the lens. So when you're using something like this, it can get really bad. I was in a scenario in the Botanical Gardens in Burlington, Ontario, and I was down by the waterfront. It's wide open, lots of room, and I had my camera on wide tracking with bird detect. And what I was doing was I was getting water birds as they were diving and flying and swimming and all that kind of good stuff. Worked like a charm, everything was happy. Then all of a sudden, off to my right, I saw an immature bald eagle and a red-tailed hawk duking it out because the eagle was getting too close to the hawk's nest. So I got some shots, worked fine, but they were a little too far away. I wanted to get closer. So I ran up the path and now I had to shoot through some trees to get the birds. And guess what? I was in wide tracking and I did not have the birds in the frame when I started. I was looking for them. And the wide tracking, here's the kicker with wide tracking, it picks the closest high contrast object in the frame. And in this case, it could have been a tree trunk, a branch, some leaves. It was anything but the birds. So I never got a single shot off of those birds. I was always trying to stop it from focusing on part of the trees. And I've had this experience before when I've had wide tracking on and bird detect, and I'm tracking a bird through the air and the bird goes into some bushes and forget it. It can't find the bird anymore. All it's doing is going from one branch to another, trying to grab onto something, and it's going all over the place. So here I should have actually been in single point. When I was doing the shoot, I didn't need wide tracking. Because bird detect was on, that's all I needed. And if I lost the bird, I could use the single point to get my focus back on the bird. Now that sounds obvious when you speak about it, but at the time when I moved from being in the open to being in the trees, it never dawned on me what my problem was. So that's what I'm getting at. You've got these ramifications that when you lose face detect or bird detect, it defaults to whatever mode you happen to be in. And if you're in the wrong one, good luck. You're going to have a bad result. So you have to be aware of two things when you're setting up face detect and bird detect or animal detect, whatever you're using, is that it has to work both ways. With the bird detect working and with the bird detect not working, you want consistent results. So those are the things we have to think about with Fujifilm autofocus. You've always got to think about the mode you're in, which you do with every camera system. You're going to need to worry about detection modes that you're in, whether it's face or eye or bird or dog or whatever. Then you're going to worry about stickiness and the speed of the object that you're tracking. So you should be set up for that. And when it comes to zone focus, you should be set up for front, center, or rear. And because if you leave it on auto, it's just going to grab whatever it wants. So that's the thing. You have to take that extra step to go into those AFC custom settings and get in there and move the stickiness around, move the speed around, and also deal with the zone, front, center, rear. You get those things right, you're going to get very, very reliable results out of Fujifilm cameras. If you get it wrong, then you can get some really frustrating results. So it's something to keep in mind. You have to make the extra effort to get these things set up correctly for your situation. But when you do, it works great. So give that some thought. Cheers.